r/AskReddit. Lawyers of Reddit. At what point, when working for a defendant, did you realize my client is a monster? I listened to a 911 call where the victim's throat was slit while on the call by our client. I will never forget her gurgling and sounding like she was dying. Somehow she ultimately lived through this, saying, "He killed me, he killed me." I'm on the other side, but I've got a defendant who went to prison for starving 3 adopted children to the point that they needed weeks of hospitalization, then got out of prison and married a guy with children so that she could start starving them too. Listening to her interview, where she attempts to justify what she did to both sets of kids, disturbed me more than any of the murder cases I've worked on. What was her justification? She did nothing wrong. She was just trying to help them be healthy and beautiful. She felt bad for the first set of kids because they needed her, etc. It wasn't my case, but I've seen the pictures. The first set of kids looked like Holocaust survivors. They were 4 to 5, and she had them completely brainwashed to think only she would ever love them. Had a divorce client, husband, and father who disowned his autistic son, tried to argue that he should get all of his wife's retirement having not worked for 12 years. Contacted me during the height of Hurricane Sandy. He was in the Bronx and me in Manhattan, saying he wanted to hold his wife in contempt for not paying him that day while the storm slammed New York City. Told me I was making a huge mistake getting married. My wedding date was November 3rd, 4 days after Sandy, saying that I was going to be miserable and regret it. I could go on. But the worst was when, several months later, since his divorce was taking a long time, he sent death threat letters to myself and my wife saying that he had hired an executor to kill the 2 of us if his divorce wasn't finalized in 60 days. Called the police and they said he left his premises 1 day earlier. I heard nothing from him until February 2014, when he emailed me saying he needed a winter coat from his wife and could I help get it for him. Ironically, the divorce didn't have to be completed because he killed himself before the judge signed the judgment of divorce. TL. Doctor, miserable guy who wanted to spread his misery and cross the line when he threatened to kill my wife. The first week I started at my current criminal defense firm, I was tasked with cataloging discovery from our client's phone. The phone had multiple, talking around 4,000, videos, photos, text exchanges with women under 16. Though not all of the girls' ages were confirmed, most, if not all, were under the legal age of consent and many were barely pubescent, naked and being prostituted over 1 year. He would lure these girls in exchange for drugs. Nothing felt totally bizarre until I came across one video where he was clearly forcing himself upon a literal child who was so high on benzodiazepines, not willingly but rather forced, and choking her in the process. When our firm confronted him, he said he was in love with her and that's why he did it. He would also take these girls to hotels and make them have sex with one another while he taped, but nothing beat what I said above. Pretty horrifying stuff for my first week on the job. Oh, I can share a good story. I had a teacher in high school who was a former lawyer. We always asked him why, gave up his practice to start teaching. He finally caved and explained that his last case was the deaths of 3 people. Apparently there had been a 4th. It was 2 couples who, in the act of a drunken, drugged-out orgy, decided to kill, partially eat, and dismember one of the women. I guess it seemed like a good idea at the time. As a lawyer, he said it was pretty open and shut, but he had to get his clients the best result possible, and he was exposed to all the horrid details, the pictures, and their reasoning. My teacher had such a far off look when he explained it that we could see it really got to him. When I had to go to the US Attorney's office to view the evidence in his case, there they were, the hundreds of images of child porn he had traded, the close-up images of his baby's genitals that he had taken and sent around the internet, the pictures of his neighbor's daughters playing in their kiddie pool. Realized he just could not help himself. But he also never once claimed responsibility or showed remorse, so I don't feel too badly for him. My best friend worked courts as a US Marshal for the first 2 or so years of his career. He'd tell stories of when they prosecuted kiddie diddlers and they entered thousands of images into the record, and the jury had to view all of them, as each was an exhibit of evidence. He knew better and didn't look at the monitors, but he told stories of jurors starting to cry, shaking with rage, and even vomiting after seeing too much incredibly awful stuff. The trials took forever because the jurors would have to take recesses to calm down. There are some messed up people in the world, man. Criminal defense lawyer. I can name a few instances where I was just absolutely disgusted with my client. Caveat, these are mostly years ago when I was taking just any old case. I most practice white collar and federal now. First, I won a DUI case because the government messed up on something right before trial was to begin. My client gives me a hug and completely reeks of alcohol. He has driven to court. I took his keys and called his mother. Second, client who was accused of molesting a 12-year-old. He was mid-40s at the time, and I had to shut him down real quick when he tried to tell me how the 12-year-old was coming on to him. Third, I represented a woman for a grand theft charge. Left her in my office to get some things copied before she left. After she left, I realized my sunglasses and car keys were stolen. I tracked her down in the lobby and told her I was not going to represent her anymore and I would call the police if she didn't empty her pockets in front of me and give me my things. Fourth, I had a client who was released after 25 years in prison for murder, and then the same day he beats up his prospective new landlord. He ended up getting another 10 years. He was unrepentant and laughed about how he hit the guy so hard his eyeball popped out. I thought, this guy deserves to be in prison. Took the case to trial anyway, and, shocker, lost and he got 10, the maximum. Fifth, client who pretended to be a doctor so he could sell steroids. According to the Gov, he had numerous clients who were made to believe that his steroids would cure their cancer. They paid him hundreds of thousands of dollars and some of them died. I just thought that was pure evil. I had a client who was accused of domestic violence. Essentially he threw his girlfriend out of a second-story window. Now he's got a terrible history, but so do a lot of my clients and his attitude is a little entitled. Also typical. But he also knows the deal and wants a plea deal. So I'm not really prepared when he absolutely refuses the no jail offer from the state. Keep in mind there were like 5 witnesses. Why? Because they wanted him to pay for her medical bills. Okay, an asshole but whatever, not the worst. What I did was his counter offer. I ain't paying that bitch's bills. Tell them I'll pay for the window. Prosecutor was not happy. U/Tinaya Jumma stole my twist. Murder, robbery, and most crimes involve regular people who did or may have done something stupid due to alcohol or situations. But the client you keep an eye out are the ones charged with fraud and the like. Liars, cheats and all around shady people generally speaking. Even the gangs operate on a code of conduct. An old-fashioned warlike code of conduct. Honor and courage are important to them, even though they commit crimes. 22 years threatened twice. So not that bad. The real danger, not in criminal law. It's family law. That's where people get really heated. It's personal. Civil defense here, so maybe not as juicy as the crim defense folks. Some of the work I do is employment defense, particularly sexual/age harassment/discrimination cases. I'm pretty cynical and see a lot of cases where plaintiffs are full of shit, particularly in harassment/discrimination cases. In one case I was defending a company and that company's manager, jointly. The manager seemed like a straight up guy, and I pride myself in being a good judge of character. I was pretty convinced the case was just payback from a disgruntled employee. To my credit, the plaintiff, a 38-year female, was a really poor employee by all accounts. Still, it didn't prepare me from what I found doing a review of every email the company had stored on their servers. Not only did this guy stick his hand down this woman's shirt without consent, when she threatened to go 2 hours he said he'd get her fired and make sure she never got a job again. The lady was a single mother with 3 kids. He also propositioned her for sex in exchange for a day off. He thought the email had been wiped because the company had a 1-year retention policy. Apparently, some of the company's older emails remained on a server before the policy was put in place because of the migration of the emails from an older outsourced gig company. Not sure if my terminology is right here. I had to substitute out of the case thereafter for conflict reasons, since my 2 clients' interests were no longer aligned. Miso's mother, L, was abusive. She frequently hit her husband, was a compulsive liar, and just generally made her family miserable. When they were settling the divorce, the judge initially deemed a testimony from the kids, Miso and her brother, unnecessary, probably because they were minors at the time, and testifying against one of their parents would be hard on them, to say the least. However, the lawyer representing L was really insistent that they testify. Well, it must have been a shock to the lawyer to suddenly have 2 more witnesses with dozens of accounts of driving under the influence, domestic violence, etc. We figured L must have lied to her lawyer about some significant details, because they were completely caught off guard and more than a little angry after the testimony. We like to believe it helped solidify some of the criminal charges placed against her. It was a nice bit of karma after years and years of gaslighting and false rumors that her own lies got her caught. I'd love it if you liked and subscribed.